The Whispering Shadows. It was a foggy autumn night when Lucy moved into the old house at the edge of town. The neighbors had warned her, but she was determined to start fresh after her recent breakup. The house was cheap, and the promise of solitude was too tempting to resist. From the moment she stepped inside, she felt an unsettling chill. The air seemed thick, as if the house itself was holding its breath. The wooden floor creaked under her weight, and the walls were covered with yellowed wallpaper, peeling at the edges. The house had been abandoned for years, and it looked every bit as forsaken as its history suggested. On the first night, Lucy had trouble sleeping. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard whispers, soft, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to come from the walls themselves. She tried to ignore them, attributing the sounds to the old house settling. But as the days went by, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. "Help us. Don't leave." Lucy tried to shake it off, but the whispers followed her wherever she went. In the bathroom, they echoed off the mirror. In the kitchen, they hissed from the shadows. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't escape them. One evening, unable to sleep, she wandered through the house, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. As she passed the attic stairs, she froze. The whispers were louder here, like they were beckoning her upward. Compelled by a force she didn't understand, Lucy see The Whispering Shadows continued. Years passed, and Lucy moved far away, putting the house and its haunting memories behind her. But no matter where she went, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was following her. It wasn't until she returned to town, years later, to visit her childhood home that she realized the truth. Her visit was meant to be a brief one, just to see her aging mother and maybe catch up with a few old friends. But when she arrived at the familiar street, something felt wrong. The town had changed, but it wasn't just the storefronts or the new faces. It was the way the air hung heavy, like it was charged with static. One afternoon, while walking to her mother's house, Lucy passed the empty lot where the old house had stood. But instead of the overgrown grass and a for sale sign she expected, there was a newly constructed building, almost identical in shape and size. Her stomach churned as she stared at it, an unsettling sense of recognition creeping over her. As she stood there, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from an unknown number. Hesitant, she opened it. "You should have left. He's waiting." A chill ran down her spine. The message had no signature, no name, but she knew, in the pit of her stomach, it was from Jonathan Blackwell. Lucy felt her pulse quicken. She thought she had escaped, but now it was clear, the house hadn't just been a structure, it was a trap. A place where something had anchored. The Whispering Shadows. On the edge of a small, forgotten town, there stood an old mansion, abandoned for decades. Its windows, shattered by time, reflected nothing but darkness. Children dared not go near it, and the locals spoke of it only in hushed tones, as though mentioning it could summon something vile. Evelyn, a young journalist new to the town, found herself intrigued by the stories. She had heard rumors of strange lights flickering in the mansion's windows at night, of eerie whispers carried on the wind, but she was a skeptic. There had to be an explanation, something rational, something human. One evening, armed with only her camera and notebook, she decided to investigate. The mansion loomed ahead, the crumbling gate creaking in the breeze as she pushed it open. A sense of unease washed over her, but she ignored it. Her determination was stronger than her fear. As she stepped inside, the air turned cold, the silence oppressive. Every step she took echoed through the empty halls. Faint whispers seemed to follow her, growing louder, but whenever she turned, she saw nothing. Evelyn's flashlight flickered as she ventured deeper into the mansion. She reached a room with a cracked mirror, its surface covered in dust and grime. Her reflection stared back at her, but something was wrong. Her eyes were empty, hollow, as if they weren't her own. Suddenly, she heard it. A voice, soft, low, and unmistakably clear, whispered from behind her. "Leave." Spin. The Whispering Shadows, Part 2. Evelyn's heart thudded in her chest, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The air around her felt thick, suffocating, as if the very walls of the mansion were closing in on her. Her fingers, slick with sweat, fumbled desperately at the window, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if the house itself was holding her there, trapping her in the grip of something ancient and malevolent. She spun around, her eyes darting wildly, searching for the figure, but it had vanished, like a shadow, swallowed by the darkness. But the whispers remained, swirling around her, now so close they seemed to come from inside her mind. "Stay. Stay with us." Her pulse quickened as she backed away from the window. The walls, once silent, now creaked and groaned as though they were alive, shifting and moving beneath her feet. The mansion felt like a living entity, breathing, watching, waiting. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the room, something snapped in the darkness. Evelyn froze, every muscle in her body locked in fear. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't move. From the corner of her eye, a figure began to take shape. Slowly, impossibly, it emerged from the shadows, a woman, pale and gaunt, her eyes empty voids, her mouth twisted into a grotesque smile. Her limbs moved in jerky, unnatural ways, as though her bones were broken and reassembled in the wrong places. Evelyn wanted to scream, but no sound escaped her lips. Her legs felt limp. The Whispering Shadows, Part 3. Evelyn's feet moved before her mind could catch up. She stumbled through the woods, the earth beneath her soft with fallen leaves, her breath ragged and uneven. The cold air bit at her skin, but it did little to ease the burning terror that consumed her. She had escaped the mansion, but had she? The voices, those insidious whispers, were still there, clawing at the edges of her thoughts. "You can't run. You can't hide." The words rang in her mind, faint but growing stronger. The shadows were with her, relentless, watching her every move. No matter how far she ran, no matter how fast, she could never outrun them. She tripped, falling to the ground, her hands scraping against the rough bark of a tree. When she pushed herself up, her eyes fell on something strange. A figure stood in the distance, barely visible through the haze of